今日はピーター・シンガーさんをお迎えしています。日本の動物倫理に関してどのような印象を持っていますか？
Well, I regret that animal ethics in Japan has not made more progress. It's a pity that animal ethics is lagging behind in Western countries, in particular places like the United Kingdom, the European Union, some of the parts of the United States like California perhaps. They have made more progress for animals in protecting animals in many ways, including stricter controls on the use of animals in research, but also very importantly how animals are treated in factory farms and prohibiting certain forms of confinement of animals that are still used in Japan, making sure, for example, that hens laying eggs have enough space to walk around and stretch their wings, which is not the case here. So it's a pity that animal ethics has not made more progress, and I hope that it will. I'm puzzled by this because I know that Japan has a strong Buddhist tradition, and one of the most central precepts of Buddhism is compassion for all sentient beings. So I find it puzzling that Japanese do not follow this. And obviously, if you have millions of animals in factory farms and people buy those products, they are not showing compassion for all sentient beings. So I would have expected that there would be more of a movement against this really awful treatment of animals than there has been. And I'm not sure why there hasn't been more of a protest against treating animals so badly.
Yes. あなたは日本の価値観について集団主義、集団のための個人の献身、日本の研究者は類人猿をより擬人化して解釈してきたと書いています。また日本には仏教に加え神道という日本独自の宗教も広まっており、アニミズムについて言及されることも頻繁にあります。動物倫理を推進させる際に日本的価値観や文化の特徴が有利に働く点、または不利に働く点は何だと考えますか？
Well, it's possible that the ethic of the more collective ethic, the ethic of being part of a group, although in many ways it's a good thing, but it may have the negative effect of making it more difficult for individuals to criticize what the group is doing. So it's possible that it's harder for somebody to stand up and say, this practice is wrong. That obviously will be disruptive to some extent. It will perhaps go against the Japanese value of harmony. So that may be a barrier to advancing the values that would see animals being treated well. Perhaps it could also eventually be a positive thing, because if the group or most of the group can be persuaded that change is necessary and desirable, then perhaps the loyalty of the group will mean that everybody will do that. But it may be that it's harder to reach that tipping point where the values of the group change, and you don't have to be like an individual rebel standing up against the group, but rather you are supporting the values of the group as a whole once that shift has become more widespread.
次に、各国で動物の権利擁護を掲げる政治団体、いわゆる動物党が設立されています。市民団体と比較して動物党の役割とは何でしょうか？また動物党に期待することは何でしょうか？
Well, it's an interesting development, I think, the animal advocacy parties, because they're trying to have a political presence and to change things through the political system. Now, when I first started thinking about animals, I didn't particularly think about establishing political parties for animals. I thought that rather one should try to change the policies of the existing parties, the major parties that are in government. And in some countries that has worked, as I was saying. For example, in the United Kingdom, many years ago, I think in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a movement to get the political parties to adopt better policies for animals. So there are two major political parties there, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And in particular, the Labour Party was persuaded to adopt stronger policies for animals. And that succeeded when Labour came into government. They had a policy of abolishing the hunting of foxes with dogs, and people riding on horseback. It was very, very traditional English sport, but it was also very cruel because the dogs would catch the fox and tear the fox to pieces. So the Labour Party said that they would prohibit that, and they did, and that is no longer legal in England, and basically it doesn't happen. So that is one way of succeeding. You change the policies of the major parties. And I think in a country like England, which basically has two parties, I mean there are some other parties, but it also has a voting system where the party that gets the most votes wins the seat, and even if they don't get a majority of votes, they will still win the seat. There's no preference distribution, there is no proportional representation. So in that electoral system, to establish a party for the animals, I think, might be counterproductive, because you would take votes away from the party of the major parties that had the best policy for animals, and therefore they would not get into government, and therefore they would not be able to implement those policies. But when you have a voting system that involves proportional representation and small parties have a chance of getting elected, that's a different situation. And I know that the first party for the animals was established in the Netherlands, where they do have proportional representation as a voting system, and where they have a very low threshold for getting elected. So they quite soon got people elected to the Dutch National Parliament, and they are still getting people elected. And they are having an influence, because even if there's only small numbers, they can ask questions in Parliament, and they can publicise what is happening to animals, and they put pressure on the other parties to have better policies for animals, or else to lose votes to them. So I think they have a desirable influence. And that has happened in some other countries as well. I think in Spain there are parties for animals. In Australia there is the Animal Justice Party, which really only wins, has only contested the upper house seats of the Australian state parliaments. It hasn't won national parliamentary office. But it's made a difference, and I think it's a useful strategy. So it might work in Japan as well. Of course, right now you have a government with a huge majority, and you probably can't make any impact on that. But in the long run, having a political party advocating for animals will be a way of getting more attention to the animal cause. So as long as you have a voting system where the preferences will be distributed, then I think that's a useful thing to do.
日本の動物党であるアニマリズム党は、動物の法的権利を段階的に実現するための核となる需要を探しています。それが大型類人猿の権利ではないかと思っています。1993年に大型類人猿プロジェクトを執筆されてから33年が経ちましたが、今どのように評価されていますか？
Yes, I think the Grade A project is still an interesting project to introduce people to the idea that rights are not only limited to humans. I think that the point of the Grade A project was to try to break this barrier where you say humans have rights, animals don't have rights, and there's just this sharp division. And then when you start to talk about great apes, people can easily recognize similarities between the great apes and us, thanks to the work of people like Jane Goodall and Baruta Galdikas and Diane Fossey. We have very good accounts of the social behaviour of great apes, of their strong rich emotional lives and their family bonds, and also their ability to think about the future, to reason to some degree. So it becomes harder to say that while all humans have rights, no animals have rights. And the other important factor here is, of course, that people don't eat great apes. So there isn't a big industry which is defending the production of great apes, as there are industries defending the production of pigs and cows and chickens, and also of animals for the laboratory, like rats and mice. So that may make it easier to make this breakthrough in terms of rights for great apes. And although the project has only succeeded in making small changes in some countries, it has made a difference. When we published the book in 1993, it's not only me, but also my colleague Paolo Cavalieri, an Italian animal activist and thinker. Great apes were being used in laboratories in the United States, and that has succeeded in being phased out. Some other countries brought in laws and protections for great apes. And currently Spain is about to get, I think, a law protecting great apes. It's been sort of put forward by the Ministry of the Government in Spain. It's going to be published for discussion and suggestions in the next few days, and hopefully it will be passed and there will be a law for great apes in Spain. So that's a good example to follow of the way that something like this can be done, and can not only improve the lives of great apes, of course, themselves, but also have some larger effect on getting people to understand that it's not like there's all animals here and all humans here and they're completely different, but rather that there is a continuum, that great apes are closest relatives, and then there are other animals like other monkeys, for example, who are closely related to them, and so on and so on. And that it's really a gradual succession of relationships and capacities that we have. So I think it's a good project to start with in Japan.
Thank you. 最後に動物の権利擁護のために政治家を目指す人々に励ましのメッセージをお願いします。
I think if you want to become a politician for animals, you have to have quite a thick skin. You have to put up with a lot of criticism, even with some ridicule. People will try and laugh at you and mock you for being concerned about animals. They will say, you know, humans have enough problems, we should be concerned about humans. But that in itself is just evidence of how speciesist people are in their thinking, how they only focus on humans and not on other beings who are also capable of suffering and also can have terrible lives at the hands of what humans do to them. So you need to be prepared to be always fighting against conventional attitudes, trying to change them. But on the other hand, you can have a sense of being on the right side of history, of having strong values, of fighting for something which I think in the long run is going to change. I think that the general movement is going to be to include animals as sentient beings within the sphere of beings who we have laws about to protect, and who we're concerned about, and whose treatment we must change for the better. So if you have that persistence and that thick skin, then yes, welcome to the cause of becoming a politician working for animals.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you for the questions. Very good questions.